Hello guys, welcome. So today we are going to be talking about atmospheric perspective. Atmospheric perspective, or you can still call it aerial perspective. It's the same thing. So when we talk about perspective, most people only know about the linear perspective, and this is the common one that has to do with lines, vanishing points, horizontal and vanishing point, those things we use to create depth and space in our art, stuff like this, for shortening stuff. This linear perspective, but we also have aerial perspective, and this one has more to do with uh, ideas rather than, it's still about painting, but it's controlling um, elements in our painting to create the illusion. Because no matter what we do, we are still drawing on a flat surface, on a 2D flat plane, and we are trying to create depth in this our flat surface. We are trying to create depth to make it feel like there is space, there is distance, there's room inside this flat surface. So we are going to be talking about atmospheric perspective and how it's used, some of the attributes and things to consider when working with it. First, we have talked about the difference between linear and aerial perspective. Now, aerial perspective is something you need to, is something that is done. I think it's mainly modeled, it's modeled through the eyes. It's what we see. It's realistic. Um, we have let's say this is a field or a distance. This is our paper. So this is our flat um surface or painting, whichever one you, and this is flat. We're thinking of it like a window, like this. You see this painting I created is like a window. It's still a flat surface. You can see the depth, you can see everything, but it's still a flat surface. So when we talk about atmospheric perspective, you consider it when you talk about depth. um Linear perspective is considered from every point of view. No matter what you are making, you need to think of perspective. But atmospheric perspective, as the name implies, has to do with the atmosphere, has to do with the air spaces, and there are these elements we manipulate to give us the idea or the feel of space, atmosphere in our painting. We have our painting, we have foreground, we have middle ground, and we have our background. And things closest to us are sharp, they have high contrast. But immediately it starts going to the middle ground, we start losing this sharpness, this contrast, things start fading away. So take note of that. Value, the effect of let me bring the effect of value changes with distance. So as things move backward to the background, from the middle ground, we start losing value, we start losing sharpness, we start losing contrast, because things are falling backward. And the way our eye works, this is what I was saying when I said uh, it's modeled using the human eye. Things, let's say this is our eye. Things closest to us, things closest to us are sharp. If you're looking at somebody, you're interacting with somebody, the individual is close to you, so you can see the person clearly. But things far away become blur, start losing details. You can be talking to someone close to you and you can see everything in all their facial hairs, the details in their face, everything. You are seeing everything. But somebody far away from you, you start to lose details of the individual. Things start fading away, and that is because of distance. So take note of that. Value is affected this because of distance. But understand, when we talk about things fading away into the background, it doesn't mean that it becomes not necessarily muddy. We are saying it loses value. So, but still, we can still see the separation of elements. For example, look at this, my painting. You can see immediately the character, immediately things in the background, we start to look at the background, we see value is lost, especially in this point. Start to lose value there. You can't see what goes on. You start to lose value from this point. This is foreground. You can put this whole part. Let me change the color. This part, middle ground, and then you can see the background, and you see how the background has lose value, but we can still see what's in the background. It's not muddy. We can still see what's there, we can still see the shapes, but we know things are not that clear anymore. And why is that? Things lose value, and actually there's a reason. Distance, the way the eye works, skylight, skylight gets a lot of power, a lot of influence. The skylight has influence even from this point, from the foreground, but it's not strong because our eye is closer. We can see details at that point. But when it goes backward, the light becomes strong, and that is why you see what I did here. The loss of details of the background here has to do with the color of the sky. So there are things in the atmosphere. If there's fog, there's dust in the air, but also there's skylight influencing atmospheric blur. So take note of that. And one thing also we need to keep in mind is atmospheric blur, atmospheric blur, and painterly, let's just call it painterly softness, because I told you this is modeled according to how the eye works, but still painters have used this idea, played with it to create an aesthetic, or to tell story. I think that is the best way I can put it, to tell story. We control the eyes of the viewer to points we want them to focus on. We create, for example, look at this image. You see how the background is completely blurred out. Yes, distance play a key, but also I want the viewer's eye to be focused on the character. And you can see how, looking at the painting, immediately your eye is on the character. Yes, you can feel the background, you can feel everything happening there, but your eye is on the character. This is an old painting I created for a crypto project. You can see how everything is just blurred out. It's still taking notes, still drawing inspiration from the idea of atmospheric perspective, but now we are going into painterly softness, using composition to play a role in your painting. So take note of that. We are slowly, you go through atmospheric perspective, and then you get to a point where you know how to manipulate your painting composition wise to create something, to direct the eyes of the audience to places you want them to focus on. So take note of that. It's the same thing happening here. This is atmospheric perspective. You can see how I blurred the background. If we zoom in, you can see it very well. How things are blurred. From this point, it's actually a little bit sharp, but as you go into the painting, at this point you are not even seeing any of the grass anymore, any of the details of the grass, but you know that is the grass. So take note of that. But you can see things in this point of the painting. At this point of the painting, the details are really strong. So take note of that. We are playing with contrast. We are fading things away as we go back inside the painting. We are going through the background, so we make things blur to create depth. But still keep in mind, you can play with this to create story, to tell your story, to direct the eyes of the audience to places you want them to focus on. So take note of that. In everything you do, don't mess up your painting with this idea. Always think of depth. So the two things you should think of is either you are using atmospheric perspective, blur, painterly softness to talk about depth, or you are using it for composition to direct the eyes of the audience. So take note of that. Keep it in mind. It's something that is useful. It helps to direct the eyes of the audience. You can see what's happened here. This is the main character, and I want all the viewers' eyes to be on the character, and so their eyes are there. But still, I wanted to play with the realism in the painting. You can see the leaves or the flowers, the crops, the brushes, the trees. Their details are not touched, but immediately you leave the foreground, immediately I start to soften the details. By the time you get here, it's completely washed out. But this character, because he's in the foreground, not the middle ground, he's in the foreground, so his details is the same with this elements in the foreground. So take note of that. Keep this in mind when you're making some paintings, to create depth, to create realism. Your style, the style does not matter at this point. It's the same, it works the same way, but you can break all these rules. Take note of that. There's nothing that is concrete or standard in art. You can always tweak, break, or manipulate any of these tools to fit the way you work. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something, and I will see you next time. Thank you.